In this lesson, we'll learn how to handle the basic authentication with the requests library. So on the http://bin.org website, we can spot the authentication methods available. You're more than welcome to experiment with the rest of the methods, but in this particular lesson, we are concentrating on the basic auth. However, the principles more or less are the same everywhere. In essence, our request to the server will need to contain the username and the password. And we can set them up here and later try to authenticate against them. So let's say for the test purposes, the username will be user and the password will be password. Very clever. And now I can click this execute button just to check that these credentials are in fact working. So let's type them in and press the sign in button. But for the sake of the example, I've made a mistake in these credentials, so it's not letting us through. So if I'll click on the cancel button, down below we see the response code 401, unauthorized. So we didn't pass the authentication. Let me clear the response and execute that again, this time passing the correct credentials. So if I'll click on the sign in button again, I'll see the response code 200, so OK, and the response body was populated with some data. Okay, now that we know the principles of how it works, let's jump into the code and implement the same logic with the help of the requests library. So as you can see, the URL consists of the type of the authentication, so basic auth, as well as the username and the password. Of course, in real life, we will never even think about constructing the URL with the username and a password in it, but this is just for the illustration purposes. So to be able to handle this basic auth with the help of the requests library, we'll need to import HTTP basic auth. Now let's write a GET request passing our URL and our credentials. So let's save it to res because later we'll use the print results method to print the response. So request.get, we can pass our URL and we can also pass the credentials right here in this GET request. So we can say auth equals and then our username, so Avacoda, and the password will be Ave password. Although it is logically possible to do it that way, it is not the best way to do it. We should rather create an HTTP basic auth object and store our credentials in that object. So let me create a call to this print result function, passing the res. This is a result or the response from our GET request. And just for the demonstration purposes, let's run the code without the HTTP basic auth object. So we would have a result that we'll later compare with another way to do things. So as you can see, there's a 200 response, and we also have some body populated with the data. Now, what we want to do is on the line preceding our GET request, we want to create our HTTP basic auth object. So we'll store our credentials in this object. And now in our GET request, instead of specifying the username and the password, we can just specify that it is going to be the creds. So the HTTP basic auth object with credentials. When we run the code now, we see the identical result, but this is the better and Pythonic way to do the basic auth. Now that you know the basic principles of how it works, I encourage you to try other types of authentication provided by the website http://bin.org.